Hello, and thank you for joining me for this webinar about indirect student services in comprehensive school counseling programs. As you probably know, I am Sarah Kirk, and I am the school counselor specialist at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. Our student support division at the Oklahoma State Department of Education is committed to serving schools, families, students, and of course, you as school counselors. Today's presentation is going to dive into indirect student services. Some people may find this topic less than thrilling, but not me. I love talking about indirect student services because I think they are often misunderstood and underused. And so I hope that after today's presentation, you realize just how important these student services are in your comprehensive school counseling program. So we'll talk about how they fit into the national model, what they are, different types, and then we'll summarize and close up. As always, please keep in mind we are not striving for perfection here. We are striving to better serve our students, and that is what comprehensive school counseling does. Perfect is never the goal, just stronger school counseling programs. That's the goal. So let's dive into where these fit in the ASCA National Model. Just as a brief summary, I'm sure you've heard it many times before. The ASCA National Model is simply a framework that outlines the components of a comprehensive school counseling program. It is not a step-by-step guide. It's an outline that allows you as a competent and strong school counselor to build a program that best serves your students. And the great thing about the ASCA National Model is that it is an outline that, if implemented with fidelity and if done well, we know that it will have a positive impact on our students' achievement, attendance, and discipline. And of course, that's the end goal. So in the ASCA National Model, we say there are 3 domains: academic, social and emotional, and college and career. Those are the 3 topics we focus on in our work as school counselors. There are 4 themes: advocacy, collaboration, leadership, and systemic change. That's really woven into everything we do as school counselors. Then we have the 4 components. You find those in the square to the right. Those are the components that make up the national model framework: define, manage, deliver, and assess. And we know that together this creates a data-driven support that serves all students within our school. So today you'll see in that little square that in the deliver component is direct and indirect student services. So we'll be focusing on that deliver component and really diving deep into indirect student services. I also want to mention, while we're here, the 4 themes of school counseling: advocacy, collaboration, leadership, and systemic change. These are really important when we talk about indirect student services. You'll hear me say those words a lot through today's presentation because it's really, really important that we're using those themes. We're using our advocacy skills. We're using collaboration and our skills as leaders to really drive that systemic change. And systemic change doesn't only occur when we're providing those direct student services, those face-to-face interactions with students. It also occurs when we're doing this more behind the scenes type work in the indirect student services. I truly, with all my heart, believe that true systemic change cannot happen without really strong indirect student services. And you'll hear that again and again as I talk about how these indirect student services should be a part of your comprehensive school counseling program. So just a little more about the national model and why we want to create a comprehensive school counseling program based off the national model. Like we said, it makes sure that our decisions are data informed. It makes sure we're delivering our services to all students, that it's developmentally appropriate, and that we're strengthening the skills of our students, making them more ready for that post-secondary readiness and success because of our school counseling program. We want our school counseling program to close achievement and opportunity gaps. Again, all students. This is an equity-driven model. And the result is, like we said, improved outcomes for our students. So you'll see here the chart that's included in the ASCA National Model about appropriate and inappropriate activities for school counselors. I use this chart as an advocacy tool all the time. Look, I already said one of those themes of school counseling, advocacy. But this is a really powerful tool because it really outlines how we should be using our time, what's appropriate, and then how we shouldn't, what's inappropriate for a school counselor to do. So those arrows are pointing to several of the different pieces that are showing appropriate activities that fall under this indirect student services. So I just wanted to point this out to show indirect student services are so appropriate, so appropriate. So make sure you hear that. When I first started in school counseling, I thought that if my time wasn't face-to-face with students, my time was being wasted, or it was in that inappropriate column over there. But that is not true. When we're providing indirect student services, we are supporting our students. Absolutely. Sometimes our indirect student services are way more powerful than our direct student services. And we'll talk about that as we go on. But you'll see on this chart, the ones I pointed to, when we consult with teachers, that might be to schedule when we come in or when we're talking about the needs in their classroom. That consultation is an indirect student service. Also, when we consult with teachers about classroom connections, effective classroom management, all of those different elements, we are providing our expertise to help the teachers be more effective to serve all students. That's us consulting with them. So important. Also, when we consult with the school principal or other educators within our school building on different needs. I know I spent a lot of time consulting with my principals about different discipline issues and things like that. I wasn't disciplining students ever. That is an inappropriate activity, but it was totally appropriate for me to consult with our principal who didn't have as intense training on human development and different restorative practices we could use and all sorts of different ways we could react to that discipline issue. And my principal loved that because that's not where her training was. And so that can be really powerful. And again, think about how important that is for that student. That is an indirect student service that is totally changing how we are providing supports to our students, which is so important. And then we also advocate for students when they have different difficulties, like maybe they have an IEP or are on a 504 or have other different issues, and we're having a team meeting and we get to be there and be an advocate for those students. We want to be there to provide that support and that consultation and collaboration with the families. We are a vital member of the educational team, and we need to remember that as school counselors. So we're an advocate for the student, and sometimes that looks like consulting with the team or collaborating with the team or even making a referral. So that is another important piece. And there I go again saying that advocacy word because you're seeing it really intertwined into this work as we provide indirect student services. All right, so when we think about the national model, we have those 4 components. We saw them in the square, we saw them a couple different times: define, manage, deliver, and assess. And today, like I said, we are focusing on that deliver component. This is when we are delivering student services, either directly or indirectly. Now, we've already talked about that today is going to focus on those indirect student services. So you'll see that highlighted there. Those are the 3 areas of collaboration, consultation, and referrals. You'll hear those 3 words a whole lot of times today, but those are the 3 ways we provide indirect student services. Excuse me. We also provide direct student services, and those are really important too. And those include instruction, appraisal, and advisement, and counseling. And if you want to learn more about those, check out the webinar about direct student services. We really dive deep into what those are. But I wanted you to see here that both are equally important, okay? That's an important piece of this. I'm gonna take a drink. Talking too fast, getting too excited. Excuse me. Okay, so let's keep going. I'll try to calm down. I get super excited about this work, if you can't tell. I want to send you all of these exciting feelings. All right, so we already said that under the deliver component is the direct and indirect student services. So I just included this here so that you can remember that these are the two components of deliver. But like I said, today, we're focusing on indirect, and those are the services provided on behalf of students as a result of the school counselor's interactions with others, okay? So these aren't face-to-face interactions with students. That's those direct student services. These are done on behalf of students, but that piece is important because we're still doing them to serve our students. That's why they're called student services, indirect student services, right? So what they look like is that collaboration, consultation, and referrals. And just like direct student services, our indirect student services, the outcome is enhanced student achievement, equity, access, all the same things. It's just done in a different way. But like I said, still vitally important. Just as a reminder, we should be spending 80% of our time in these direct and indirect student services. It is the bulk of what we do as school counselors. So let's dive into those indirect student services. So like we said, students are the beneficiaries of these indirect services. So it is not an indirect student service if it has nothing to do with our students, right? If it is, gosh, I don't know if I can think of an example off the top of my head that isn't an indirect student service, but if it is painting the school, well, that's not an indirect student service. I guess they kind of are the beneficiaries, but not in the way we're talking about here, right? These are indirect student services that the outcome is improved student success. And that's why we put them into those three categories that we'll talk about more. Typically, those three categories, consultation, collaboration, and referrals, is working with either our caregivers, our teachers, our administrators, other school staff, and community stakeholders. So it's working with those different groups that directly impact our students to improve student achievement. And again, this is what's promoting that systemic change because we're getting others involved. We're finding ways to meet our students' needs, and it ends up providing those equitable services for our students. Just as a reminder, I always like to mention this when we're talking about indirect student services because we are bringing other adults into the picture here. You know, we're bringing caregivers, we're bringing teachers, we're bringing administrators, other school staff. So be really careful when we're involving third parties about FERPA and about our ASCA ethical standards as far as confidentiality goes. Typically, you would only bring someone in if they're directly involved with the student. And then it's okay. You're not breaking confidentiality or FERPA, but just be aware of that. Because even if, like an example might be if a student were to come out to you as gay and you're collaborating with the teacher, you cannot share that information with the teacher, even though you all are providing indirect student services for that student, because that would break confidentiality with you and the student. Now you can work with the teacher about all sorts of other things, how to make them feel included in the school environment, maybe some other underlying issues, but you can't break that confidentiality just because you're collaborating with the teacher. I hope that makes sense. That doesn't break FERPA because that teacher has interest in in providing supports for the student because the teacher is the student's teacher. Now, what we cannot do also is bring an unrelated party into it. So we can't collaborate with the 11th grade history teacher about our 9th grade student that's having a difficulty in math class. That's not collaboration, that's gossip, right? So that's not the same thing. That teacher has no interest in the student who we're collaborating or consulting about. So just keep that piece in mind. All right. So now let's talk about those different types. I've already said them several times, but let's talk about what they are so it makes a little more sense. So consultation. Consultation, I think, is often misunderstood. It can be a little confusing, but it's simply the process of providing information, opinions, and recommendations to individuals who can support a student's need, or seeking information from an expert. Okay, so school counselors serve as both providing consultation and seeking consultation. Okay, so let's go back to my example. A student has come out to you as gay, and they've actually, in this example, come out to their teacher as well. And the teacher comes to you having no idea what to do with this information and how to meet this student's needs. They've never had this situation. They're in the dark about what to do. You, as an expert, can provide consultation to that teacher about what best steps could make the student feel included, make the student feel safe, make the classroom environment accountable, all these different pieces. You get to consult with the teacher. Now, that probably means the student's not there, right? So it's not face-to-face with students, but it is directly serving that student because you are helping that teacher create a safe and accountable environment for that student to learn. All right. So you provided consultation. All right. Same example. The student has come out to you. You've provided some consultation to the teacher, and now the student has come to you and wants to come out to her parents, but her parents, because of religious reasons and cultural reasons and all sorts of things, are very likely to be unsupportive of this. And the student tells you all of this, okay? So maybe you as a school counselor in that situation are like, uh-oh, I need some help. I don't know. I can't just tell the student this is all going to be okay because I don't know if it's all going to be okay. I think I want to call the local PFLAG chapter or and PFLAG, I'm going to forget the exact name, but parents in support of gay and lesbian individuals. So that organization might be able to provide you some support, or maybe there is a mental health therapist in the community that provides therapy specifically for adolescents who are coming out. You might need to seek consultation from them because they have more expertise than I do in that scenario. And I want to make sure I am also seeking consultation to provide the best supports for my students. Does that make sense? So in that example, I provided consultation and I sought out consultation. We do both all the time in school counseling. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here. So when we provide consultation, I already gave in my example where we are sharing strategies that support student success. So it might be with families, teachers, other educators, community organizations. It could be a whole slew of things. And it could be on any of the three domains: academic achievement, college and career, or social and emotional. Okay, we have expertise in all three of those domains. So we might consult and provide consultation, sharing strategies with all of our stakeholders in those three areas. So I put a couple of examples down there. This could look like sharing expertise about how child development impacts an issue. So you might be seeing a teacher who's really struggling with a student in the classroom, and you realize it's because that student is younger than the rest of the class. They're on the younger end. And maybe you can talk with them about how that developmental milestone isn't there yet. Or maybe that student has special needs that's impacting their development, and you're an expert in that. So you can help share strategies for that teacher that can make that student more successful. I'm not working with the student, that'd be a direct student service, but I'm working with the teacher to create a better environment for the student. Or I mentioned talking with the principal about discipline and how we could support more effective discipline policies that allow students to learn new skills and new behaviors as replacement behaviors when there's a discipline issue. I'm not necessarily working directly with the student yet, but I'm consulting with the principal about better discipline strategies for our school. Another one I listed there, assisting teachers as they infuse college and career development into the curriculum. Such an important one. This starts young. I worked with a first grade teacher who, in their social studies curriculum, were talking about different jobs in the community, and they wanted help on how to make that a little bit more about their future, the students' future jobs, not just like what the job is, but imagining themselves in those careers and in those occupations. So I got to consult with the teacher about how to do that. Perfect. I wasn't teaching the lesson. The teacher was, but I was able to share my expertise. And then this last one, gosh, I did this one all the time as an elementary school counselor, observing a classroom and providing ideas to maybe improve classroom management techniques or provide interventions for students or different supports, things like that. I wouldn't provide the intervention. I wouldn't provide the classroom management, but I would observe with the what the teacher was doing, what the students were doing, how they were responding to different things. And then after, I would consult with the teacher and say, hey, it was awesome when you did this. And then when this happened, I saw this student got distracted. What if instead we, blah, 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 blah. Another thing I did a lot when I observed is I often saw that students needed like a safe place in their room. So I would then consult with the teacher about how to create like a calming corner or something like that. And again, not because I know it all, I certainly don't, but that's my area of expertise. They're experts in teaching students how to read and teaching them math and all the things I would have to get a lot of consultation on, but I can provide consultation on my areas of expertise. Does that make sense? All right. But of course, we don't know it all, like I said, so we also need to seek consultation at times. And that's when we need ideas of how to meet students' needs. So we need to consult with educational, legal, and mental health experts to help inform our decisions and design strategies to promote student success. Okay, so when we need support, we want to make sure we're asking the right people. One of the examples that comes to mind with this one is I think about students who were in the foster care system. And I didn't always have the best strategies or know exactly what to do to support students in foster care when they would come to us, often for a short period of time. And so I would often seek consultation from their DHS worker or from whoever was assigned to them that not only knew the student better than I did, but knew those skills and that expertise about how to work with students in the foster care system. So I sought consultation from them. Many, many, many other examples, though. It might be those in other fields, like you might consult, like it says legal, you might need legal expertise, you might need mental health expertise. It might be in your own building, though, too. It doesn't have to be someone who is higher up than you, or that's not what consultation is. Consultation is just expertise. So an example of when I sought expertise or I sought consultation in the school setting is when I first started. I don't have an education background, but I was teaching a lot of classroom lessons. And I, for the most part, did okay, but I had some students that I couldn't get them on task and I really struggled with it. And so when that would happen, I would ask the teacher if we could meet and I could consult with them about what might work better next time. They knew the students, they know classroom management, they know teaching strategies much better than me. And so I would seek consultation from them in that setting. So again, it wasn't face-to-face with students, but it was so important to meet students' needs, whether it's the foster care example, the teaching example, whatever it is, you can see how that is creating bigger change, right? All right. So now let's talk about the next indirect student service that we can provide as school counselors, and that is collaboration. Collaboration, we hear a lot. It's one of our themes of school counseling because we want to be a collaborative part of the educational team. Collaboration is simply the process in which multiple individuals work towards a common goal. And when they're collaborating well, they share responsibility for the tasks. So this is, we know what this is, right? I think this one's a little more easier to understand. It's a collaborative effort. It is a group of people working together with a common goal, all sharing responsibility to meet that goal. So we see it in a variety of situations: teaming and partnering, school district committees, parent workshops, community partnerships, and crisis response. So we'll quickly go through each of those to help you wrap your head around maybe some of the ways you haven't thought about collaboration. So teaming and partnering, this is probably the most common. This is when we as school counselors work with families and administrators, teachers, school staff, businesses, and community organizations to support improvement of our students, right? To improve their outcomes. So this can be resource sharing, joint presentation, advisory councils, formalized partnerships. It can be a variety of things. So some of the things that come to mind for me with this is when we would collaborate to meet like some of our school climate goals. So our school team would meet together to talk about what can we do to meet this school climate goal of improving our overall school climate. And we would bring parents into the conversations and caregivers. We would bring community members. We would bring school staff and administration. So it's really bringing a diverse group together to talk about how can we meet this goal? What can we do to improve our overall school climate? It also mentions here resource sharing. So making sure that we're all aware of different resources and things like that that are available in the community. And when there's a resource that's lacking, like if your school needs a food pantry and doesn't have one, you can partner together, collaborating together to find a way to meet that need. Again, it's not face-to-face with students, but obviously it impacts them directly, indirectly, I guess. School and district committees. So we know as leaders, again, that's another theme of school counseling, it's important to serve on committees. Now, I'm not telling you to sign up for every committee ever, because that's not good self-care, but serving on committees or advisory boards can really help promote student success. It can generate school-wide and district support for your school counseling program, and it can really help define what it is your role is and how the school and district can help you to reach your goals as a comprehensive school counselor. So these district and school committees aren't pointless. They're not just a resume builder or a check mark. If you use them appropriately and collaborate effectively with the people on those committees, it can be super powerful. I have to tell the example on this one of when I was the lead of our PBIS committee at my school, and I was actually on the district PBIS committee as well. And I kind of got put on it because I was young and naive and said yes to everything. But I was so glad I did, because it touched so many different aspects of my school counseling program. So for example, we ended up creating a mentor program, and the PBIS committee kind of oversaw aspects of the mentor program because it was directly related to school climate and to community stakeholders being involved in our school, which was a part of our PBIS goals. So it was really directly connected to school counseling and my school counseling program, but it was also directly connected to our bigger school-wide goals of PBIS and implementing PBIS school and district-wide. So it had such a positive impact on my school because my involvement in that was so connected to my work as a school counselor. Also, parent workshops are a great way to collaborate. So we can facilitate or organize informational sessions and do different types of workshops to help enhance student success as well. So again, it's not face-to-face with our students, but it is absolutely indirectly impacting our students and their success, especially if we tie it to our school counseling curriculum that we are providing in our direct student services. So say we're doing a bullying prevention unit, direct student service of instruction, providing these lessons to our whole school, then we do a parent workshop that complements it, teaches the parents what the students have been working. That's an indirect student service that's directly tied to that direct student service. How powerful is that? Community partnerships, also really, really important for an indirect student service to collaborate with those community partners. You never know how they can support your school. I have like 100 examples of things that fell into my lap because of community partnerships. A church that we had partnered with decided they wanted to fund a buddy bench at our school. A different church we partnered with did all of our Thanksgiving baskets. Oh my goodness, I just could go on and on. We had a real estate company that did a lot of great things for our school. We had an insurance company that provided truly anything and everything we could want. Like I just could pick up my phone and they would help us out like this. The copy machine shop that like came and serviced our copy machines in our school. They had a room at their main location in town where we could come and get food just for school counselors to keep in their offices for snacks. How cool. Probably didn't cost them that much money. It kept us in contact with them. It was a great community partnership. So many ways organizations can help, and often they want to help. They just might need some ideas of how to help. Like I know that the copy machine company, a school counselor told them that would be a great partnership, a great way to collaborate. It wasn't me, but someone else in our community told them that, and it was fantastic, and they loved it, and they felt so helpful. So there are so many ways like that. We had a different organization in town that provided our school supplies, and they loved doing that. So you just never know what a community partnership could build, but collaborating with those community partners is absolutely important. And then when we collaborate for crisis response, so we want to make sure we're working with our administrators and teachers, school staff, families, community members to provide that immediate and follow-up intervention when there are urgent needs due to a crisis. Crisis response, we know, requires leadership and organization, and it certainly isn't a one-person show. It really involves a collaborative effort. So making sure that we have written procedures and guidelines when that does occur, and making sure we're collaborating with everyone and everyone's on the same page. So for example, we collaborated at my school with a local business complex that was our location where we would go if we had to leave our campus completely. So we collaborated with them. We always gave them our written procedures. We gave them our updated guidelines, all of that. It was a great collaboration because they were local, they were close, and they had room for all of our students if we were to need to leave our school. And we also would have used them for reunion needs if there was a need for like parents to show up and reunite with their students. So having that community partnership was important, and having a plan for crisis response is always important, and it needs to be a collaborative effort. All right, so let's dive into that very last indirect student service of referrals, a very, very important one. They all are important, but referrals occur when our students' needs extend beyond what we can provide as a school counselor. I know that often as school counselors, we're trained to provide long-term therapy. Maybe you're an LPC or a social worker, or you do private practice on the side. I'm one of those. I am trained in that, but that doesn't mean it's appropriate to provide that in the school setting. When we're in the school setting, we provide brief and targeted short-term counseling supports. And when a student need is beyond that, it's our ethical obligation to refer them to a resource that can provide that more long-term support. You might have that within your school. If so, awesome. I've worked at schools that had it embedded, and I've worked at schools that didn't. And so I know it can be different and more difficult if you don't have it within your school, but it's still our job to work to make that referral to a community agency. Okay. Even when it's a little more difficult if we don't have embedded therapists. It's our ethical obligation because it's our duty to serve all students, and we simply cannot serve all students if we're providing long-term therapy to a small number of students. It's not because we don't want to or we're not trained to, but that's why. So I hope that makes sense. So we really want to make sure we understand that our referrals are going to be really varied. Sometimes it may be to tutoring or to career support. It's not always just mental health support. Sometimes it is mental health support. Certainly when there's suicidal ideation and violence, abuse, depression, some of those types of things, of course, that would warrant a mental health referral. But keep in mind, there might be other referrals too. I've made referrals to psychologists for testing we couldn't do within the school setting. I've made referrals to tutoring supports or to groups in town that worked on like study skills and organization for students who needed beyond what I could provide in the school setting. So there's a lot of varying degrees of those referrals, but keeping in mind that when it gets past that short-term support, we need to make that referral. So to do that, it's really important that we have an up-to-date referral and resource list. So this ideally should include internal and external resources. So internally, you might include professionals employed by your school, like our school psychologist, interventionist, depending on what you have, if you have a social worker, those types of people, to make sure your caregivers know about the resources that are available in your school. Then, of course, we also want to include resources that are external. So those mental health agencies, Department of Human Services, intensive care facilities, translation services. Don't forget about that one. That's so helpful. Temporary housing, domestic violence shelters, LGBTQ plus centers, food banks, pediatricians, other healthcare providers, financial assistance, parent education resources. Gosh, the list could go on and on. I really highly recommend that you have a really robust list out there for anyone to get and that anyone has access to, so that if something happens overnight or over the weekend, the caregivers aren't having to wait till the next week to get your list or for you to start frantically looking for people that could provide that help. You want this list to be on your school website, on your school counseling website, handed out in hard copies, left in the office, all sorts of places, so that caregivers have access to it at all times. And in fact, it's included in our ethical standards that we should provide a list of resources, but in our ethical standards, it also states that we do not endorse or give preference to a specific resource or practice. I always had a disclaimer at the bottom of my referral and resource list that said, these are people I've heard of or someone's used, but I don't have personal experience with them, and I am not making any sort of endorsement for them. That's an important disclaimer, I think. I also think it's really vital that we have a diversity-informed resource and referral list. So we want to make sure that the list includes resources that are intended for our traditionally underserved students. So the racial and that says ethical, but it means ethnic minorities, students with a disability, students who identify as LGBTQ+, etc. So we don't want all white female therapists on our list, right? And we don't want only churches as our community resources. And we don't want only, I'm trying to think what else, only, I don't know, you get the point, right? We want a really diverse resources. Like I mentioned, the translation services. I never thought about that, and that wasn't on my list for a long time, but how important for those families who speak a different language. So making sure it's diversity informed. And keep in mind that if your community doesn't have access to diversity informed external resources, if you're in a rural town, or a town that just doesn't have a lot of that, then make sure you provide online resources. There are so many robust online resources for those traditionally underserved students, and that can be really helpful. Or maybe resources from the nearest city that does have a diversity-informed resource support. All right, so you'll see here, this is straight out of the national model, that these indirect student services, referrals, consultation, collaboration, we've talked about, we want it to serve all students, but then we also want our data to inform which identified students need more support, okay? And remember, this isn't face-to-face with students. This is that interaction with others to support our students. And just as a reminder, 80% of our time should be doing this. And as I've said before, that this is also in our ethical standards. And when we do not provide 80% of our time with that direct and indirect student services, it's our ethical obligation to work towards a school counseling program free of the non-school counseling assignments identified by ASCA as inappropriate to our role. That's where our advocacy and our leadership really comes in as so important. Now, I love to show this graph. This is from a research report put out by ASCA in 2020. They asked, I think I've said 6,000 school counselors, but I think it was actually 7,000 school counselors, how they spend their time. And these were the results. So you can see there under the yellow, the indirect student services that we've been talking about today. On average, all respondents 16.8% of their time. So it's not a huge chunk. You'll notice direct student services for all respondents is 57.5. That's a lot more of their time because that face-to-face interaction with students is so important. But that 16.8 of indirect is really important too. As I hope you have heard today, these supports, this advocacy and collaboration and really working towards that systemic change for long-term positive outcomes, equitable services for our kids often happen from our indirect student services. So if you're spending between 15 and 20% of your time providing those indirect student services of referrals, consultation, and collaboration, you're about at the national average, which is pretty appropriate. But again, total between direct and indirect, we want it to be 80%. So in summary, our indirect student services are these services school counselors provide to caregivers, teachers, administrators, school staff, and community that benefit the student indirectly, but absolutely benefit the student. They are delivered through consultation, collaboration, and referrals, and 80% of our time should be spent in direct and indirect student services. As always, ask yourself, if it's what's best for kids, you know you're on the right track. Thank you for all you do to serve your students, whether it is directly or indirectly. I am so grateful. Your students are better because of it, and our community is stronger because of your support. I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.